Ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4. It's fast, yeah, you're gonna shut up. Battle your battles, you gotta tell it how to the cure. If it's trash, yeah, you're gonna take it out. Handle it rapidly, got the magic, you got it for sure. You can see what's in future. Hi, hi, hi.
Oh my God.
Mission sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's astonishing.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
2, 1, action.
Hello everyone, welcome to ProAV. Thank you very much for joining us for our Canon C80 live stream. I'm joined once again by Tom. How are you, Tom?
I'm brilliant, thank you. Great to be here again.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you were hoping to catch this last week, apologies, we had to rearrange it. Various illness bugs going around after IBC, but how was IBC, Tom?
IBC, it was great. I mean, it was brilliant seeing so many new customers, also some old customers as well, and then obviously showing them the brand new C80 and C400 if people haven't seen that.
Of course,
as well.
Because that hasn't been on a show yet.
It was great, first time for everyone to see it, really.
Yeah, exactly. And see the two of them as a pair as well, of course.
Yeah.
So cool. As we go through, any questions that you have, we've got obviously the slides. We're going to do an overview. We've got the C80 here with us. We've got C400 here with us as well, so we can do a bit of chatting about the two of them if we want to. But I'm very happy for this to be led by whatever you will want to know. I mean, the camera's been released now for a couple of weeks, so people will have seen it, will have read up on it a little bit more than when we quite often do these literally just after launch. But as you chat in the thing, I can see your chat. So that's Team 2 Films. If anyone hasn't watched Team 2 Films' videos, go watch Team 2 Films. That's our good friend Leon and Natalie. Go watch them. But as we chat, I can see questions in here, and I will bring them up as we go to direct as need to be. And so I can see a few questions coming in already. Thank you very much for that. Just to get started though, leave down in the chat who you are, what kind of work you do you use Canon already? If so, which cameras do you use? If not, which other brands do you use? Give us a little bit of a picture as to who's watching down below. That's always really useful. Get a bit of conversation going. But yeah, should we start at the top? Because I think this is a launch that surprised a lot of people, because the C400 has not been announced for that long. I mean, it's only just starting to head towards shipping now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everyone was very excited about the C400. Obviously, there was a lot of great specs within that camera, and now the C80 has come out. I think a lot of people are now trying to pick between the two and deciding right which is the best camera for us, which, like we say, we'll go into later on. But today the focus really is around the C80 and kind of what that brings to the market and how exciting it is really with all the features you get within this camera. So just quickly diving in to where it kind of sits in the range. We've now got effectively 6 cameras within the Cinema EOS range, and the C80 basically sits between the C70 and just under the C300 Mark III. So it's that full frame but compact RF cinema camera. So that means we've now got our 4th RF mount cinema camera as well, which is nice to see the additions being added in there. And yeah, let's dive straight into kind of some of the main headlights. So basically we're building on the success of the C70, because the C70 has been a hugely popular camera. I know myself, I shoot with it. It's such a great looking image, and it's a lot of great spec. Yeah, exactly. And that's what the stream's shot on with 2 of our main shots here today. So yeah, the C70 is such a great camera, and it's still here to stay. There's still reasons to choose the C70 as well. But there were certain requirements that people wanted to add to the C70 to move themselves into this range. So
it looks like we've got a bunch of C70 owners watching this. Spears has 2 C70s, a few C200 owners as well. So there's definitely a few C200 owners that could be due an upgrade. Moonrise Media, Alvin says his C70 and C200, Trench C70 and documentary filmmaker. Emerald Audiovisual seems to use pretty much every camera under the sun. Blackmagic Design, Canon, DJI, Lumix. And Reese says, still waiting for something to steal me away from the Blackmagic 6K for small form factor and discreet documentary shooting. Well,
this could be it.
This could be it. Could well be it.
So, I mean, these are just some of the things we've improved on from the C70 and took that step further. So, of course, as I mentioned, we've now got a full frame sensor, which we'll dive into a bit more about the specialness of that sensor as well. Improved connectivity, of course, the RF mount, fantastic autofocus that's been stepped up even better than the C70, as well as a lot of other additional improvements, which, again, we'll go into. But in terms of who this camera is for, it's kind of broken down into 3 areas, but I think anyone that's a C70 shooter, I think it definitely sits well with them for a start. So anyone that is shooting corporate content, documentary making, anyone wants something that's discreet and you can easily squeeze this in a bag and take it out on the road with you. Anything documentary, then this camera works really well for that. Anything narrative driven, but also those for news capture and E&G style. I mean, this camera, because of its compact form factor, it can be used in any kind of shape or form. And then finally, a big area that we talked about with the C400 is this camera is actually really great for virtual production and extended reality and visual effects. So for those looking to get into more of that, starting at visual effects, working their way up to virtual production, there's some special features that this camera has that makes it stand out from some of the other cameras out there for that sort of thing. So diving into the key features. So one of the highlight specs for this camera is it's actually got a full frame 6K back illuminated stacked sensor, which is very exciting.
There's a lot of keywords in there, isn't there?
There is a lot of keywords in there, but they are important, which is why I've not removed any of them. But this is in fact the same sensor that we announced within the C400.
Yep.
So image-wise, you're going to be getting the same image that you get from a C400, which is obviously great for those looking to combine the two cameras together.
And I guess let's just translate that a little bit, just in case there's anyone watching that aren't familiar with the terms. I imagine most people are. But full frame, obviously, we know, a nice large sensor, 6K is the resolution. BSI means backside illuminated, which basically means that it captures a bit more light. You know, it projects light onto the sensor in a slightly different way. And stacked sensor is about the readout performance. And so a stacked sensor can pull information off of it and pull that image into the rest of the camera quicker than a normal sensor can, which is why we see the rolling shutter performance being quite good.
Rolling shutter, low light, the unique triple base ISO, and even things like the readout speed for all of the different formats. There's a lot of benefits for Canon moving towards this back illuminated stacked sensor.
Absolutely.
And of course, still maintaining great dynamic range as well, which is great to see. Still the compact and familiar design. As you see, the actual body it's almost identical in terms of from at least the first initial glance to the C70, just with a few additions of like the SDI port sticking out on the top there, and a few other connectivity features built in. But it's fairly similar. There's not much difference there in the shape and size. We've now got the new dual pixel CMOS AF2 with our EOS intelligent tracking recognition autofocus. So this means you're just going to get more, better improved autofocus.
Now, this is something that obviously is quite big in the camera, but hasn't really been talked about in a lot of videos out there, including our own one, I've got to say. So perhaps this is something we could do a little bit more of a look at when in the camera.
Definitely, and we've got a slide on that and how it's been improved, but it is just from personal use and using it, it is a lot more sticky and
absolutely
a lot more
and it seems
reactive.
to detect the faces a bit more reliably and move on to tracking the head and things like that a little bit better, doesn't it?
All down to that new sensor and what the processing can handle effectively. We've got professional 12-bit RAW, so this is all internal RAW to the SD cards, all the way up to 6K 30p RAW. And of course, if you're not shooting RAW, then it is oversampled 6K down to 4K, and that's 42 10-bit with lots of recording formats and also high frame rates, so all the way up to 4K 120 as well. Of course, it's RF mount, as we talked about, but don't forget, if you are an EF lens user or even PL for those filmmakers, there's nothing, there's no downside to using any of the Canon adapters. We have also announced a Canon PL adapter, so if you do want the lens contacts in particular, which is great for virtual production, then we have a Canon specific adapter there, but really opens up your lens choice with this camera. Now, connectivity on this camera has took that nice big step up. A huge and welcome addition, which a lot of people have been asking for from the C70, is a 12G SDI port. So this is probably one of the biggest bit of feedback we've had, but it's nice to see it there. And the great news is you can still use the HDMI, and you can have them independently from one another in terms of what your what on-screen displays, what focus tools are being output to each. So if you want to have a LUT coming out of the SDI, and then you want just false colour coming out of the other HDMI port, then you can do that. There's a variety you can mix with them. You don't have to worry about disabling one or the other. We've also on the back added a Ethernet port, so it does mean now that works with our control systems, which we can talk about later, and also built-in Wi-Fi now, so you no longer need any dongles or anything to connect to the USB-C port. It's all built into the body effectively, and you've still maintained the timecode port, which has always been on the front under the handle grip, as well as the 2
which is a full
mini XLR.
BNC.
It is, yes. Exactly. And of course, one thing I think we sometimes forget to mention, but it's been there since well, the start of our Cinema EOS cameras really, is those built-in 10 stops of ND, which are really quick. I mean, if I show you...
They've just had a speed increase, haven't they? So the C400, C80 are faster
They're
than
even faster.
previous
So
generation cameras.
if I just press this, if you can see my screen there, you can see they're really quick, and you can cycle all the way through to...
Keep flicking
to
through.
10 stops.
Nathaniel was madly panicking, bashing the buttons.
You just about got there. There we go. You can see nice and quick. And the great thing about them being solid ND filters is you're going to get a consistent colour throughout them all. And 10 stops is a huge amount. So if you're using lenses like we've got here, the 50mm 1.2, trying to maintain your shutter speed or shutter angle outside, you can still shoot these lenses wide open in broad sunlight, really. So it's
And that is
really
something that
nice.
doesn't get talked about a lot, because I mean, a lot of customers do reference technologies like Sony's variable ND technology, which is fantastic. But of course, it only goes to 7 stops, and 7 stops when you're wide open on a lens like that, f1.2, isn't often enough on a bright sunny day here in Hempstead, let alone on in sunnier places in the world. If you're in Africa or America or somewhere like that,
Exactly.
it's gonna mean you're still stopping down your lens.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it just changes the way I work, really, especially when I've gone from mirrorless cameras, which didn't have built-in ND filters, and I'm having to screw them on and off. Once you go to a built-in ND system, it's kind of hard to go back, really.
Absolutely.
Because you soon adapt to it. And as I mentioned, virtual production and visual effects are a really big part of this camera as well, just down to the metadata that they can write, which we can explore a little bit later on as well.
Absolutely. So a few more people are chiming in with what cameras they have. Ding Dong has talked about C200 owner here as well. William has 3 C70s. Wow.
Great.
All things film. That's our first Sony user, DP with an FX30.
Okay.
And the C80 has caught his eye. Nicholas, 2 C70s and an R5 as a third. Looking forward to my C80s. I guess you pre-ordered. Fantastic. Aaron is C300 Mark III and C70. So there's lots of people very interested in this from current. From the C70 and C200 seem to be the main 2 upgrade paths.
Yeah, I've spoken to a lot of the same C70, C200 owners, that especially C200, that have had them for a long while, and they've been a great camera. And I think is this the next step up from what they're currently shooting on, which obviously ticks a lot of those boxes, really.
Absolutely.
Especially with the SDI, which I think was the one thing that some people were holding back from.
Exactly.
If they're
Stopped
going to move
moving to the C70.
C70, exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
Brilliant. So just in terms of shooting styles, the great thing with this camera, because of the format, is just how easy it is to rig it up or rig it down. So
Yeah.
you can literally have it in this really compact, small form factor, which, to be honest, is really nice to just pick up and shoot with. It's comfortable. The handle can be removed if you want to make it smaller. It literally fits in a backpack if you need it to for travelling. But then if you want to put it on a gimbal, then you can. And I mean, when we first got this, I think I put it on an RS3 Pro with this same lens, actually, the 50mm 1.2. And I had it balanced in a few minutes. It wasn't difficult at all. It's pretty handy.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the overall size a little bit more, because that's become a bit of a talking point with the C400 as well, because part of the C400's appeal is that it has shrunk down a little bit, the form factor of the C300 Mark III and C500 Mark II. And particularly when you start de-rigging off the top handle and the side grip and the brackets and stuff, it's a really quite small, compact, square camera. And when you put it side by side with the C80, all of a sudden the C80 isn't that much smaller anymore.
No.
So I found it quite difficult when making the video for ProAV how to talk about that. And I think I settled on some wording like the C80 was the all-in-one design, whereas the C400 is the modular scale it up or scale it down design. Because I was really surprised by just how close they are.
Yeah, I think with the change in the design of the C400, it really closes that gap. And it's no longer a case of, if you need a gimbal, go for the smaller cameras like C70, C80, and go for, C400 for other things. Whereas now, C400 in that unique compact form factor.
Because it works really well on a gimbal. Because the body's nice and square and easy to balance and nice and central in terms of weight. And the monitor you can take off and stick it on the hand grip.
Exactly. So it does add a bit more variety. So for those that are wanting to, relocate the LCD around and not have additional monitors, that's where the C400 might be the the better choice for people. But see this a bit like a mirrorless camera kind of on steroids. It's just that little bit bigger, but it's just easy to just pick up and shoot because it's just all in one body and form factor. It kind of reminds me of like the 1DX range.
Exactly.
Slightly. And
it's quicker to pull in and out of a bag as well. So for sort of events and documentary work, that kind of thing, for the most part, the C400, you're going to want to rig it up and down a tiny bit, even if that is just disconnecting and reconnecting the LCD screen, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Whereas the C80, you can literally keep the lens on it, pull it out of bag, flip out the screen, and press the on button.
Yeah. Exactly. That's it. So diving into the performance of the camera and some of the things it offers. So I think we talked about this a lot, really, but just to alliterate on that 6K full frame BSI stacked CMOS sensor. So getting all those words in, but it really is offering you so much more benefits, and that's one of the questions that people might ask is why we didn't use the DGO sensor that's obviously within the C70. I know it's the first question people came up and asked me. And yes, the DGO sensor in the C70 C300 Mark III is fantastic. It's brilliant, unique technology, and that's why it's still got its place there in the range. But in order to achieve a full frame sensor, this is the reason we decided to go down a BSI stack sensor, because it offered a lot of other benefits, so like faster readout speeds, also things like like improving the rolling shutter, and even just being able to achieve a great looking image, but without sacrificing other performance. That's why they've gone down that route. And the key thing is it's still maintained that 16 stops of dynamic range, which would be the biggest worry of why people might not want to step away from a DGO sensor originally. So very close. Of course, DGO we claim is about 16 plus stops, whereas this is around 16. So they're very kind of close ballpark, really.
Absolutely. So triple base ISO, I think, is one of the things that
so that's here
is really stood out with customers as being something that is very attention grabbing with these cameras, but also the first time we've seen it just on the market at all.
Exactly. Obviously we announced this with the C400 a few months back, and like I say, it shares the same sensor technology, so this camera gains that as well. But I think having those three bases really opens up your shooting scenarios and the flexibility it can offer. So if you weren't aware, you've got ISO 800, 3200 and 12800 when shooting in log or RAW. And especially having that middle base, I think that's what's so special, is 3200 is actually a really nice sweet spot for when you're shooting inside. Because when you're just using, if you're especially documentary filmmakers that might be using more natural indoor light or window light, 3200 is usually that sweet spot, just having a little bit extra boost in your brightness, but without, jumping all the way up to 12,800, which can be too much sometimes. But it really, gives you that flexibility.
Because you see on other cameras that have a base ISO of 12,800 and 800, so just the two, when you're sitting at 3,200 or even 6,400, it's a lot noisier than it would be on other cameras. And so having that sweet spot in the middle really, I think, is going to... I mean, you almost don't need to choose any of the other options. You just
Not
go for
really.
those three.
I mean, I was working with a production company they were shooting Boomtown, and they were using C400s. And at night, for the night performances, they had C400s with big CN8 and CN10 like cine servo lenses, and we went up to the cameras and we manually selected the base ISO, and we actually set those cameras to 12,800. But because of the light coming in the lens, and obviously that was the base we had decided for, we actually had an ND filter in just to bring it down a 2 stops just to be able to get that perfect exposure. But it meant they were literally shooting in almost darkness, because as you know, stage lighting at a night festival can be quite dimly lit and quite atmospheric, dare we say. But yeah, they dropped that ND filter in and they were getting super clean results on a huge screen at a festival. And previously, you perhaps would have had your ISO cranked up and it'd be a full gain, just to get the same shot. But you just have to go with it and hope it does the job. So
absolutely,
yeah, it's a really nice step up. And then here's just a quick example in terms of, obviously on the stream you're probably not going to see the quality, but it just gives you an idea of the differences in how much light comes into the sensor between the 3 bases. So 12,800 is quite a significant step up in light, so you can be literally shooting in what looks like close to darkness there, or a very very dim sunset, and still gather all that detail.
Okay, I'm getting quite a few questions coming. I'm getting a lot of chat in general, which is great, fantastic. It might be a good time to pause for a few questions.
Sure.
David put quite an interesting one. So we've already started seeing this change with Sony Cinema line of cameras, like the FX3, and unlike the FX3, the R5C has an EVF. I know the C70 didn't carry space for an EVF, and not on the C80, but will Canon continue adding EVFs to cameras? What are your thoughts on what Canon are doing at the moment with EVFs?
I think the trouble is, at the minute, everyone's trying to compile everything down and make it smaller and more compact to travel with. And as the screens get brighter and people want something smaller, that's where sometimes viewfinders are being moved away from.
Yep.
That's not to say we might not see them in the other cameras in the ranges, but in terms of this, it's all about being as compact as it can be. And then if you do need a viewfinder style, of course there is third-party options out there.
Yep.
You
in
just
fact,
utilise
we've just
the SDI.
seen a fantastic one released, because there's not that many on the market really. But Kinefinity have just launched their Eagle viewfinder, which is an SDI, but they're also launching. They showed at IBC an HDMI version. But to be honest, the SDI one would be perfect with the C80.
Exactly.
And they work really, really well. And also there's BPA style batteries from brands like Swit, which have got power outputs for DTAP to power, things like that. So it's become really easy to rig really good high quality viewfinders onto these style cameras. Because in my opinion, viewfinders are a hard thing to get right on bigger cameras. Quite why, I still don't understand, because the viewfinders on tiny cameras and mirrorless cameras, like take the viewfinder in your R1, for example, it's just stunningly good. But we still don't seem to see that kind of technology coming to the bigger ones. Whenever we have seen a viewfinder on the back of a cinema style camera still, they tend to actually be nowhere near as good a quality as the big third-party ones or the on-brand ones that you connect. Thing like your fantastic
the
VF70.
V70, yeah.
But that's that's about as much as the C80 is. And so viewfinders are in a very weird place in the industry. I think the bit that is next to come is some of the technology from the mirrorless cameras coming across into cinema. Well, because those little viewfinders are fantastic, but of course they're fixed and quite small. And
I think that's the trouble. It all comes down to how you want to shoot, and I don't think it always works having it right in the middle of the back of the camera, because you've got, especially with heavy, as they get heavier cinema cameras, you're then holding this big heavy thing up to your face, which isn't always the best ergonomic layout.
Absolutely. And so of course that's the real advantage of a third-party one, is you can put it wherever you might need it at a time. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation at the moment. A few people asking about the sensor, and is it similar to the R3 or the R1? Any word on that?
So it's the same technology. So it is a BSI stack sensor, but it is a different, a newly developed sensor specifically for the C400 and C80. So you're going to get similar kind of readout speeds, but it is produced specifically for these cameras.
Aaron has asked another fantastic question. The C80 and the C400 now have virtual production workflows along with newly added digital levels. Does this mean we might see Canon Cine cameras finally recording gyro and accelerometer data for post-stabilization? Which is a very interesting one. I guess that's similar to what Blackmagic cameras do inside because of their pairing with Resolve. But we said that's not a very fair comparison because they make both the software and the cameras and the codec, and so can integrate it so tightly. I guess the fairer comparison would be Sony, which they've done on FX6, where they can record it alongside their clips, but then you're only able to do anything with it really inside their own Catalyst opening software. So something like that could potentially be interesting.
Possibly, yeah.
That's not already possible.
It's not already possible, no. I mean, the gyro data is, as the customer mentioned, is written into the VFX metadata, but that's used specifically with our own Canon plugin, which is designed to read that in Unreal Engine. So yeah, currently it's not possible, but it is something that's been fed back because I know a few people have asked me for that. But we'll just
would be interesting. It'd be very interesting. Just gives people another option, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
Let's see. I definitely saw some other ones. Oh, what anamorphic options does it support? Should we do a quick little flick through the menus to the anamorphic? I mean, obviously we don't have an anamorphic lens on now, but what D-squeeze ones can we see in there?
Testing me in the menus now. See what we can find.
Being monitoring.
So here we go. Anamorphic.
Perfect.
So if we turn
Is
that
it
on.
testing you? You found it straight away.
So these are the D-squeeze we've got. So we've got 2 times 1.8 and 1.3 currently.
Yep. And there is no 3x2 or 1x1 or anamorphic.
There isn't at the minute, no.
That would definitely be something that would be nice to be added. The camera I'd really like to see that on is actually the R5C, because of course that's got the stills sensor in it, which is slightly taller. I'd love to see OpenGate support on that camera. But yes, absolutely, grain tray. It's very would be great to have in there. Aaron says, I'm still amazed to see full frame ND filters and 2 trays fitting inside the RF mount with only 20mm of flange distance. I love having 10 stops of ND also for time lapses. How did Canon make it fit? I don't think either of us can answer
it's
that.
It's definitely some wizardry. I mean, I've seen the part out of the camera,
have
and the thinness between each piece of glass, especially because to get the final 10 stops, it stacks an ND in front of each other. They are literally probably not even millimeters apart, so it's a lot of clever engineering to achieve that.
It is very clever.
We were very surprised when we announced our first RF camera that could achieve that to begin with, because it's very clever.
TB Punk Films, now this is a very niche question, it says, can I save my settings on an SD card from my C70 and then upload these settings to the C80 without any issues? I guess he's thinking about upgrading his camera and copying across his settings really nice and easily.
I don't think it would be possible, just because it'll write a different file and it's a different operating system. Yeah, of course you can. If it was the same camera, you can easily save them straight to the SD card, and I do that all the time when we're doing demos, because obviously people fiddle with your settings and change it, and if you're not aware, it is really easy just to save them to a card.
Yeah.
And then copy them to your next camera, but it has to be the same model that you're copying the settings between.
Same firmware and stuff. So a couple of people are asking why would someone choose the C400 over the C80. This guy says, everyone says if you need the C400, then you know, and that's not a good enough answer for them, which I completely agree with. There are some definite actual concrete answers, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
So I'll save that one. And another thing that might be in your thing, sorry, there are a lot of good questions here.
There is.
Is the C80 and C400 both oversampled 4K up to 120 frames a second? Now, I know that's something we went back and forwards on a little bit before launch.
So it's oversampled up to 4K 60.
60.
Yeah.
That is fair enough. Although, I've got to say, when I was looking through the camera and shooting with it, I noticed very little sharpness difference between 4K 120 and 4K 60. So it's definitely doing a very good job when it's not oversampling too.
I mean, there's a lot of data being written, and obviously it's writing into SD cards as well.
Absolutely.
But you are maintaining autofocus up to 120 as well. Which, as a slight side note, people weren't aware with the C400. We did announce a firmware, I think at IBC, which means that autofocus will be coming to the 4K 120 in the C400.
In the C400, I didn't spot that. That's brilliant news.
So they'll both match in terms of the the autofocus performance.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Right, David is saying, does this camera have a global shutter? Will we be seeing that feature making it to any of your flagship cinema cameras in the near future? Doesn't have a global shutter, of course, does it? But the sensor readout speed is fast, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's very fast. I think it's close to something like 8 milliseconds, which for most productions is more than enough. And the problem with global shutters is they have their advantages and they have the disadvantages, as with any sensor. Whereas this sensor is a really great happy medium because you've got fantastic readout speeds, but still maintaining things like great autofocus. And obviously the triple base ISO. So having all of them in one is one of the reasons we've gone with this sensor over just moving to global shutter. Because of course we've done that before in, say, C700 and things like that, but it was a different beast and it had no autofocus, for example.
Absolutely, and I mean, it does seem to be the buzzword of the industry at the moment, global shutter.
Yeah.
I have a slightly controversial take on it, which I'm sure people will be able to prove me wrong with. That I personally feel that a fast rolling shutter, as in sub 10 milliseconds, really is what I mean by fast, in most situations looks better than a global shutter, I find. I almost find global shutter is a little bit too motion.
Yeah, I guess it adds to the, I guess even when you watch films and you might see a bit of it, that's just the look that it is. Obviously, you don't want
probably brain conditioning, right?
Yeah, maybe it is. I mean, you don't want your image literally sideways, but as long as you can spin the camera around or you can be in a car that's fast moving and you've not got horrible lines, skewing.
Exactly.
Then I think that's bearable.
And I'm not saying that global shutter is a bad technology in any way, shape, or form. It's really quite incredible, but I certainly wouldn't look down on a camera that has a fast rolling shutter like the C80 and C400. We've seen Blackmagic with the Ursa Cine with incredibly fast rolling shutters. And Sony have had it for a while with the FX6 sensors, always been very fast, and it's about 11 milliseconds. And so, those kinds of cameras, I personally feel the motion on them looks fantastic, even when you're whipping around and doing really fast sports stuff, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
Okay, let's try and wrap up some of these questions. Jacob is saying, is the digital image stabilization the same as in the C70, or does it use the same technology as the newly added digital level? I mean, I guess it's using the same technology, right, as the digital level, 'cause that's the whole point.
It's the same digital IS as the C400, so it is improved from the C70. Main reason being there's now a setting for vector-based IS, which actually improves the performance of, if it sees an object, it knows if the camera's moving or if it's just the object moving. So it uses a bit of clever wizardry, probably combined with the the new autofocus, because it can detect people's almost body forms a lot easier. So it's using that, and you can turn it on and off, because in certain situations, very specific anyway, then you might get some weird effects, and that's why you might want to turn off the vector-based IS. So you've got two options of it. But I mean, the great thing is, I've left a slide in here from the C400. It works the same way. But the great thing is, if you combine it with an RF lens and it's got IS in it as well, they're actually working in tandem. So they're not working against each other. Whereas previously, if you just stuck any lens on there or even an EF lens, they'd just do their own thing, which sometimes wouldn't give you as good results. So,
well, it means you're far more likely to see those distortions and stuff.
And this will work. The digital IS works brilliantly as well with even manual lenses. So if you're using old film glass, cine glass, which doesn't have any contacts, you can just go into the menu in the camera and you just set what the focal length is you're using, and it will tailor that IS to that focal length really well.
Few people talking about optical low pass filters. Does it have the same one as the C400 and that kind of thing? I certainly noticed the sharpness was pretty much identical on the two.
I mean, it's the same sensor, so it will be the same
You reckon
optical
it's the same low pass?
low
as
pass.
well?
Yeah.
Very cool. SAT says, will my Sigma lenses with EF mount work as good or better on the C400 RF mount with the RF Canon adapter? They will work to their full capability, is what I would say on that.
Yeah.
You know, that people often dismiss that RF to EF adapter, and something that I hear a few customers say, RF mount doesn't have that many lens options still, you're limited only really to Canon lenses, there's not that many affordable lenses for it. And my answer has always been, well, the RF to EF adapter works, and there's very few lens mounts have as much affordable options as EF does.
Exactly.
And you get the full, yes, they're not as fast as RF, but you get the full capability of them in their EF existence, if that makes sense.
And if not slightly faster, just because the new mount's a bit more quicker with the communication.
Okay, cool.
But we are seeing more and more RF lenses we're starting to announce into the lower like entry point as well. So for example, we recently announced the new RF 2870 f2.8, which is obviously a more affordable 2470 lens, but you've just lost 4mm on the wider range.
We are using on the 24 to 105.
2870.
20,
the
affordable
new
one.
2.8.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which works great. But I mean, there's so many options now. And of course, if you do get to the top of the range, there's some absolutely fantastic lenses, like what you were saying, the 24 105 2.8. I mean, having that in one lens, I mean, that combined with the C400 C80 is kind of the perfect pairing, really.
Sorry, I've just seen a question that is, where is the cripple hammer stored when not in use, and are there any plans to destroy it? So I can get a lot of stick because of this, and I think unfairly. I know it's your job to defend Canon, not my job to defend Canon. I would say Canon have always been very good at putting ND filters in smaller cameras, like the C70 and the C80. Canon have now got RAW recording on pretty much your entire lineup. Yeah. Whereas Sony do not. They don't have RAW on any of their cameras underneath the Burano. You've got false colour in all of your cameras now, all the rest of it. Waveform. You've got 180-degree shutter. That was a big deal recently in the Sony community, was that they added 180-degree shutter options to the FX3. And I had a few Canon customers in here sort of on the same day that it happened, and they were surprised. They're like, what? Don't they do it? Yeah. That kind of stuff. I think every single brand, from Blackmagic to Red to Canon to Sony, they all have compromises and drawbacks. And I think the days of them being so obvious on Canon, where the cripple hammer came from, I feel like we're past that. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, with some of the announcements we've announced this year, with even like the R52, the R1, I mean, there's so much great technology and advancement, and so much crammed into these cameras, especially for the price points now. I think, I'd like to think we're past that point, and people are starting to realise there's a lot of camera here you're getting.
Absolutely. But thank you for making me laugh. And I open that up to everyone watching. What cripple hammers are we missing in all of this? You know, where are you seeing these products be compromised? Let us know. I'm curious to see, because every camera does have cons as well as pros, of course. So there is so many questions coming in. George is saying, how does the autofocus compare to the C70? Is this a good time to cut to that camera and have a look at some of the differences in the menus for autofocus?
Sure.
I think George also put a question, I think I saw, apologies if this has been covered, but how does the C80's UI compare to the C70? So we could sort of look at that at the same time, because it's very similar, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is very similar. I mean, just quickly on that then, so on your main homepage, if you've come from, say, a C200 or even C300, C500, they didn't have the quick access menu. So down the bottom here, I can quickly tap in the left corner, I can quickly adjust all of my exposure, drop in an ND filter and so on. And you can even, in the top left corner here, you've even got access to all of your recording formats, frame rates and so on.
Why don't you twist around and stick it at a plant or something like that, rather than the bin in the corner of my office? That's a bit nice.
Here we go. So anyway, moving into the autofocus. So I've turned on continuous, so we can continuously see the plant and not the bin. And you've got a few settings. So, for example, if you don't want it to be continuously hunting, if it can't find anything, it's darkness or something, you can enable that as well.
Oh, hang on. So that's a change of wording then, is it? Because
That's
that was
a new one.
that track after focusing. So explain that again. Is that the same thing as focus priority, face only?
No, so that's in a different menu, which is in the next one, which we'll come to.
Right.
So this is more about. Actually, sorry, I tell it wrong. This is actually about tracking after you've found the subject. So if it found the subject, then it'll just track them, and if you put it to off, then it won't track them. It'll just continue with where you've selected with your finger, effectively.
Oh, I see. It's when it changes from that normal box to object
Yes.
detection, sort of tracking that box around.
Yes, I believe.
Interesting.
So in whole area at the minute, the nice thing with this is it'll just focus on anything, and then if I want to, I tap what I want it to adjust to. And you see the box is really nice because it actually adapts its shape. It's not just stuck as like a square box. Obviously, this is a square plant pot, but
And that was something that back in like the C200 days, for example, you had to toggle on and off with an assignable
yeah,
button.
so you can
right?
see it adjusts, and obviously if you get closer and further away, then it'll adjust that very quickly. And it is very sticky. I mean, we had an example of someone stood outside earlier, and because of the new intelligent tracking recognition being dual pixel CMOS AF2, it's just a lot more clever at knowing what the back of a head looks like.
I mean, I'm very. If you point the camera over towards Nathaniel over there, sorry Nathaniel, I'm about to chuck you onto the stream.
I can get
I'm
him
just
in.
curious to see whether it picks up his face.
I might have to
at all.
tap him, but you can see he's all the way over there, and it's found his eye all the way from.
He's
that
found his
side.
eye. There we go. I mean,
Yeah.
that is underexposed to
And
the
if you-
max
yeah.
because we've got no lights
If you turn
on that
around
corner of
as
the
well,
office at all.
oh, I think I've lost him. He's behind the screen, but there we go. He's
And he's
turned
backlit
around,
by
and
strip
it can
screens.
still see his head. Bearing in mind, he's got headphones on as well,
Mm.
and that's all the way to the edge now. So all the way to the,
And I can guarantee you the C70 wouldn't have done that.
no. And it's really sticky. It's hard to make it let go. If I'm
That is a
honest.
very good example.
But yeah, that works brilliantly well. And the transition, like you see this plant pot here, it's so smooth. And that's one thing that Dual Pixel has always been very good at, is maintaining that very smooth and more natural focus ball.
I've just seen something from Leon at Team 2 Films. I'm not the biggest fan of either Canon or Sony's approach to on-screen displays, which is to overlay them on the image. I like the approach of other cinema cameras to keep the image clean and put the information around the edges.
yeah.
You can do that, right?
So you can do that if I find the button.
He does follow on to say the C80 looks like a great camera, though, so thanks.
Brilliant. So if I just cycle through display, there we go.
There we go.
First one. And
Now,
can
you
see
do
all the
lose some of
settings.
the information. You don't get all of the same information when
Yeah.
you're in that mode.
You can, although you can customize some of what's showing around.
Okay.
It. So not all of it, but you can, put some of that stuff back on there. And if I cycle through it again, there's obviously just a fully
Full
clean,
clean.
Menu, and then we go back to there as well.
Cool. But in the one around the edges, you still get all of the autofocus display.
Yeah,
in
it's
the
probably the
middle.
most important information, to be honest. So yeah, if you do prefer that, you can do, and it's very quick and easy to cycle between. But one final thing I just want to say on the autofocus is the subject detection AF. So this has been changed slightly, because previously it just said face priority and face only. It now says detect priority and detect only. Very similar, it's just a slightly different name, but this feature for me, and I've talked about it in previous videos, it's probably one of my favourite Canon features that's in most of our Cinema EOS cameras now. In that detect priority basically means if it sees a face, it will focus on it. If the face disappears, it will focus on whatever else it thinks might be the priority in the frame. So it might be the thing with the most contrast or that stands out. However, when you're shooting things like interviews or things where the person is the priority, that's where you want to use detect only, or in our previous cameras, face only. And this feature is absolutely fantastic for things like interviews, because it means now this won't focus on anything. I can move it around. It'll only focus if it
You
finds
can
a
put
face.
it at the bin
So-
there because it's out of focus, right?
But if I just put your
then-
face there, Carl,
There we go.
and if I just moved away from Carl, or if he was to walk out the frame, then it's not going to continue to focus until his face comes back. I use this all the time for interviews, because I'm trying to direct an interview and also, rely on the camera focusing. So if for any reason they just, dip the head out, then the camera never loses them. And it does a very good job at that.
Absolutely. And what subject are in there to track? Robert is asking, please add wildlife to the animal AF.
Yeah, so you've got people and animals. I mean, on this slide here, it says what we've got, but effectively, currently, it's dogs and cats it will officially detect. Of course, the camera will track subjects, so even if it's not an animal listed, if you tap the subject, then it should still stick to them and follow them. It's just not looking for a specific eye of a bird or things like that.
Sure.
But we'll have to see if anything's added to that.
In fact, thinking about it, I was filming some chickens for the review video, and they were having autofocus boxes around them.
Yeah.
It was seeing their eyes.
Yeah, so it still seems to work in a very great way. And then final thing is just the speed settings. So this has been changed slightly. It used to be between 0 to I think 7, and then 0 down to -7, whereas now it's just 1 up to 10.
So where's the bog standard middle default here?
So I believe it's
5
7.
or is it 7?
I think it's 7, which means it's going to be pretty quick. So let me just check I'm not in face only still, or detect only. There we go. So back to this plant pot. So you can see here it's fairly smooth transition, but if you want to make it a really dramatic focus pull, let's make it the extreme of 1. If I tap to the background here, hoping that'll work. It's hard to tell because it's so slow, or maybe this plant pot. And I feel like we've got it very slow. Isn't it? Oh yeah, it is doing it. I think it's just doing it ridiculously slow. This is probably a bad example of how slow, but you can see, yeah, if you really want to drag that focus pull out, well, that's obviously the extreme. But the idea is you can tailor in your speed as fast or as slow as you like. I think 7 is a good starting point, but sometimes I find 5's about right because it's just enough of a smooth transition that it feels like a natural focus pull.
Absolutely. Right, a few more questions. Simon is saying the triple base ISO is certainly intriguing. How does this work exactly with the FX3? He's noticed the second base ISO of 12,800 is severely noise reduced, which does not seem to be the case with the C400 and C80. I would definitely echo that in some of my high ISO tests. There doesn't seem to be big noise reduction kicking in at these high base ISOs at all.
Not from what I can see, and it is an analog signal, so it's not digitally amplified to achieve that. And side by side, they're close to identical. Maybe if you start, looking at the pixels, you might see the difference. But they're, from a day-to-day usage point of view, they're fantastic results at all three.
Let's just put quote of the day. I was filming some chickens for the review. You find yourself in odd situations in this job.
Yeah.
I guess some people listening to that on the noise reduction point might think, oh, that's a shame, it'll be noisier. I think that's actually coming across as a positive from the viewer. Correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, but certainly in my opinion, the less heavy noise reduction done in camera, the better. Because for the most part, I'm going to, noise reduction has got so good in post-production now. Yes, tools like Neat Video and all the rest of it, but even just the built-in ones in Final Cut, in Resolve, they are all so good that why would I not use those? You can even use those on such quick turnaround work now because they're so fast.
Yeah.
And noise reduction done after the fact is going to work significantly better on footage that has had less noise reduction applied in
so
camera.
I mean, if you shoot in RAW, there's no noise reduction at all because it's RAW.
Exactly.
And if you're doing your own, it probably will look better. However, if you are just shooting the standard codecs of XFAVC or XFHE VCS, these do have a small amount of noise reduction done to them, but to be honest, it does a pretty good job. It's not softening the image too much or anything like that. And I guess the second part on the question of how the triple base works, when you're in the auto setting, it will just auto change what the base is depending on where your ISO is set. So if you're at even like 10,000 ISO, it's going to be at 3200 because it's below it. The second you get to 12,800, it will then change to that third base ISO.
Do you find yourself keeping it in that for the most part, or do you find yourself using each of the...
Well, the thing is, you can easily set up a button to change between them. That's what I was doing on the C400, and then you can quickly change the base. And to be honest, if you just move your exposure around them, then you know
You sort of don't need to use the
yeah,
other
you
ones,
don't need
right?
to use the others, and you're always getting a clean image, and you just use your NDs to
It's probably quicker than going in
to
and
manage that exposure.
dialing through them.
And yeah,
Interesting.
they all work really well. And of course, it will if you start going above and below them, and you put it into manual base, then that will start shifting around your dynamic range in different directions depending on how you use it.
George has put a nice comment. Also, Tom loved the footage from Cornwall. Was that all C80 footage, or was that a mixture? I guess that's something you put on social media, was it?
Yeah, so I think the stuff in Cornwall, trying to remember which one now, different projects, but yeah, I was down on the beach shooting some surfers, and that was with the C400.
Right.
And that, yeah, just looked great. I mean, that was trialing out the 6K RAW, and that just looked fantastic.
I think that brings us really nicely onto the big talking point that we haven't properly covered yet, I don't think, which is the C400 and the C80, the discussion there, how people choose between them, because I think this is almost the most important topic here. And I think a lot of people were surprised when the C80 came along so close to the C400. I actually think it's a very, very positive thing, because if you're a customer trying to decide between them, you now can make the informed decision. You know, we've had customers both ways, I guess, actually. Some pull from the C400 down to the C80 saying that's a better camera, and some who are now going for the C400 because they're like, no, I know that nothing's going to come along to upstage that, because I know that the C80 isn't actually what I'm looking for. The C400's better for me. So I think it's really good that people have got the ability to make informed choices.
Exactly, and they both offer great options. Obviously, image, as we talked about, is going to be the same. So the actual image, you don't need to worry about that. Yeah. Which does mean if you do end up with both, then of course you've got a perfect A and B cam, and they're going to cut together literally flawlessly. Yeah. But equally, if you do have C70, C200, etc., as always with Canon, the nice thing is to do with the way the colours are created in camera, you can easily match them all together just by making sure you're in the same picture profile. So you can really mix and match them. But I did put in a quick comparison of everything that they shared, and then what's obviously different between them. So here's a little breakdown. So as we talked about, they've both got that 6K full frame BSI stacked sensor. They've both got triple base ISO. Got the fantastic autofocus we was demonstrating, both RF, professional recording formats, and then they've both got the enhanced virtual production and visual effects support.
Which is fantastic, because that's something that I could have seen Canon reserving for the C400 and not putting onto the C80 to increase the differences between them. So it's great that it's on both cameras there.
I think particularly with, not talked on it too much, but with the visual effects side of it, I mean, virtual production is obviously great, but you need a larger budget for that sort of thing. But when it comes to visual effects, this is things that you're doing in post. So effectively what the camera does, it writes that metadata to the card as you're recording, and then you can use this even as a student. You could use this on a uni project to work on your visual effects, because it's writing all of that lens and camera metadata into the file for you to use. So really nice that you've got that in both cameras. So key differences between them. So I guess the way to narrow them down is the C400 is kind of for any size professional production, because of the way it can be rigged up and down, and it'll work for kind of any of them. Whereas C80 is built for that solo shooter and smaller crews that need something compact that they can easily fit in your bag and be a little bit more discreet on set. In terms of the design, we've got a more modular design with the C400, which, as we talked about, it helps being able to move that LCD to different positions, whereas C80 is all about having this compact all-in-one, as you mentioned, because you've got the flip-out screen, it folds away, it feels more like walking around with even like a mirrorless camera, that sort of form factor. With the RAW, you've got up to 6K 60p RAW in the C400, and up to 6K 30p RAW with the C80. Yep. Now, one question people might ask is, why is it 30 versus 60?
Somebody put that on their list of, they said, no full frame 60p RAW mode. This is pure Canon cripple hammer, smiley face for this camera.
So I have got
still like the camera.
I've got an answer to that as well. So, well, two answers. The first part to the answer is, one of the reasons is just down to limitation of SD cards. So not the camera. It's literally just the fact that because it has SD cards to keep it small and compact, that is just the limitation of how much data can be written. I mean, if you're think
Absolutely.
even 5 years ago, we didn't really talk about even writing 6K or even 8K to SD cards. So they've come a long way, but there's only so much they can do.
Because slight tangent, but I also saw a question, I've lost it now, but about V90 cards. Oh, there we go. Is there a current list of ones that are compatible? I've got pro-grade V90 cards. Will they work with raw light? V90 will just work with anything. Right?
Yeah, there is an official list, but usually anything that's V90, UHS2, that usually should be fine. But on the Canon website, there is an official list of tested cards that we can ensure that they've been approved for use with the camera.
Sure.
The only other part with on the 6K RAW subject is the great thing with the C80 is if you do need 6K 60p RAW, you can actually get it out of the HDMI port. So this is for ProRes RAW. Atomos with their Ninjas will support it.
Now, when I wrote the video that we released, that I didn't know what the frame rates were on that. I just knew that it could do RAW, but it's now been clarified, hasn't it, that it's 6K 60p?
It is, yeah.
Which is fantastic. So you can chuck RAW out of the HDMI port and record it onto your Atomos in 6K 60p.
Yep, exactly. So I think that kind of, hopefully for a lot of people, answers that or ticks that box for people that need that extra frame rate.
And there is a... Oh, there we go. I'll let you talk. No, that's exactly what I was about to add to the 6K
there we
RAW
go.
part.
So moving on to the RAW itself. Of course, this is Canon's version of RAW. The great thing is it's nice and compact and it's all written internal. But you have got more flavors, shall we say, in the C400. So you've got the light, standard, and high quality.
And those are significantly different in data rate. Off
They
the
are,
top
yeah.
of my head, it's something like 500 to 800 to 1,500 or something. Like there's
I think, well, in the
leap up.
C400, I think the HQ is something like 2.1 gigabits a second. So it's
so big.
It's a huge data rate. So not everyone needs that, but
No.
obviously it means that it's getting even less compression applied to it, and you've getting the most data there. Whereas the C80, again, it's coming down to what can be written for cards. You've only got LT. There is a way to get SD, and that's if you go into the different framing modes, which I won't actually. Let me see if I can dig it out. So if you go into Super 35, then we do actually get access to the ST in 25p. So if you do want slightly high quality, and that gives you 470 megabits, you have got that option. You just need to go into the Super 35 mode there.
Okay.
So there is
Talking
a
of
way
which,
to get around
people
it.
are asking a little bit about that. Does it have that crop mode if you put an RFS or EFS lens on it automatically, or is it on a button? So if you put a Super 35mm lens on it, firstly, will RFS even go on it on full frame RF?
Yes, it should. I've not actually tried it, to be honest, but if it's like EF, then it should do. If it's something I have to check.
Okay, we'll check that.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see whether it does that automatically and jumps in.
Yeah, I don't know
Something
if it
other
would. I
cameras
think
used to.
you'd have to change it from previous experience with other lenses.
Fair enough. Cool. Sorry.
Okay. And then in terms of just the I/O, so with the C400, the fact you've got Genlock, a monitor SDI as well as a 12G SDI, and a return import, which for live production means you can see the program out coming into your camera, which is brilliant. You've got a lot more functionality there in terms of connecting your camera up. Obviously, you've still got great options having a 12G SDI in the C80 as well as a HDMI. You've just got a few less. And a really important part with Genlock is for serious virtual production, really you need Genlock to sync it to the screen so you don't get any flicker trying to sync up with the refresh rate of the LEDs. So for serious virtual production, that's where the Genlock is really important, as well as just for syncing up larger multicam productions as well. And that was it.
Did we mention the all-eye frame rates? Because there is a difference in, that's the other one, is 4K in C400 can do 4K all-eye XFAVC.
Yeah, all the way up to 120.
Whereas the C80 does it up to 60, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So slight, and again, it comes down to data rates and what can be written to the card, really.
A lot of people are asking about OpenGate, so I feel like I need to bring it up. Does it have a 3x2 sensor, or does it have a 17x9 sensor?
I think it is a slightly taller sensor than previous Cinereos cameras.
Okay. I think there's a lot of people asking for feature requests for OpenGate. which it doesn't do right now, right?
It doesn't right now.
Cool.
No.
So I guess that's one to
Something
pass back.
we can pass back.
Cool. Alongside third party. George is asking, how does it work alongside a third party PL mount lens? As in, does the C80 have an inbuilt focus measure for non-autofocus lenses? So for Canon's PL lenses, it can tell what's in focus, and some of the autofocus, like the focus guide, works, doesn't it? So
Well,
autofocus doesn't work, but
Yeah.
manual focus guides work.
Yeah, so focus guide, which I guess we can quickly show on
But
here.
you still won't get any of that with third-party PL mount lenses.
Yeah, because you'd need the contacts, unless they do have even EF contacts and it's an adapter or one way or the other. But no, you wouldn't get this guide, which you can see here, which is
Yes.
really useful for manual focusing. You'd have to rely on more traditional things like peaking.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Hakan is asking, is the 6K RAW output supported on Blackmagic recorders to record B-RAW, or is it just Atomos?
Let me find a thing. I believe it's up to the third-party manufacturers to support it. But what we've been officially told is currently
It's Atomos.
these are the it actually says manufactured by Atomos, and they're the devices.
I think any of the Canon stuff works on Blackmagic off the top of my head.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so it would be Atomos with ProAV RAW.
That is a great thing though, is whilst you're recording the 6K out, you can still simultaneously record internally to the SD cards as well. That's one great thing, is in terms of recording formats with both of the cameras, there's a huge amount of things you can do to both cards at once. So if you want to record RAW to one and a 10-bit proxy to the other, you can do that. You're not limited to a really low res proxy to the second card. That's one thing that Canon always does great, is giving those huge options.
Absolutely. Cool. Okay. Is there anything else we wanted to mention before we wrap it up?
I guess just final things on the body and the new format, because there is a few changes on there, so I won't go into all of them, but effectively, in fact, go to the next slide, sorry. So one thing is with the screen. So this has now been improved on the hinge. So now
we did get a few people asking about nit brightness for that screen.
I don't know nit brightness. I know it's been improved.
It's brighter.
It is brighter than the
C70,
C70, and there is now in the quick menu, you can quickly adjust the luminance.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
I mean, I don't know if you'll be able to see.
Let's go back to that. I didn't know that it could do that.
I don't know if on the camera whether you can see how much brighter it gets, but yeah, by default that's on 0. And you can see if it's in over there, which when I've shot outside with this, it's actually really nice, and it makes it a lot more comfortable to use outside. So yeah, that's been improved. The hinge is a lot more sturdy, and now it actually has a little lock. So when you push it in, it's actually got a bit of a lip, so it doesn't just flop about. Just secures it. Same if you spin it round the other way, it just keeps it in place that little bit better. So it's the small things, but it obviously helps out. Like I say, you can see the Ethernet port on there. Your audio controls are still all on the back. There's now a little cable tidy down the corner, which is nice, which I think will be for your power supply or Ethernet cables running out of the camera.
And we now have tripod screws in the correct place, right?
We do, yes.
We can put it on a tripod
so
normally.
if you look underneath,
So I've been very positive to you guys.
Yeah, previously there was no screw hole here.
Give a bit of grief.
Whereas now, yeah, you do have them in a row. So if you are using regular tripod plates, you can obviously secure it with 2. You've still got the others here, which are more for vertical shooting, but yeah, you've got the options there. And finally, we do now have a slightly different handle, which means we can now have a multifunction hot shoe. So under this little plastic cover here, we've got the multifunction shoe, which if I show on the slide here, these are just some of the devices that will support with it. So the XLR Tascam adapter, so if you want 2 full-size XLRs or a 3rd and 4th input, you could use that. Or even just things like the Canon microphones, you don't have to use any cables, it will just pass it through there. And one thing that people don't realise is if you want to relocate the hot shoe to somewhere else on the body, if you want to still use the handle, you can buy this off-camera shoe cord, which is basically like an extension cable for the hot shoe. So you can mount it anywhere on your cage there and relocate it to a more suitable spot for your shoot.
Nice to have as an option.
Exactly.
Do you think there is potential to see more third parties added to that list? I mean, you've already got Tascam on there with that adapter, but we're starting to see a little trend of wireless receivers that go straight in through MI shoes on brands, that kind of thing.
That would be nice to see. I can only see this expanding further and further, whether it's with our own products or potentially third parties in the future. Definitely.
Okay. I saw one option that I liked on George saying, does the C80's SDI port get in the way at all? Any ideas why it wasn't moved to the back of the body like the C400 or alongside the HDMI?
I think it just comes down to form factor and being able to physically fit it on there.
Yes.
I mean, we could have redesigned the whole camera, but then that way you're going to end up with a bigger camera, or it kind of loses what people loved about the C70. So keeping it there, it means that most of your I/O is all coming out the same direction, which from a shooting point of view makes more sense. And of course you can get right-angled connections as well if you prefer it to.
Yeah, I didn't find it got in the way any more than any of the other cables.
If anything, it's actually in a better position because it's away from everything else. So if you quickly want to connect a monitor up, you're not worrying about knocking all your other connections.
And if you are hand holding it, it's away from where your hand would be. It's
exactly, yeah.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Okay, there's so many people chatting here. I'm just sorry if I go quiet. It's because I'm trying to desperately read through what everyone's saying.
I mean, just to drop it in while you're reading is just on the price point of view. We are looking around the 5,339.99, including VAT. So just a little step up over the C70. But I think the fact you're getting a C400 sensor at this sort of price point, I think it's a lot of camera for the money, really.
Oliver, interestingly, on the OpenGate point of view, says, thanks for bringing up OpenGate. And yes, it seems the sensor itself is physically 3x2, and also the internal NDs clear the full sensor height, which is an interesting observation. So hopefully maybe we see that added. Would be great. Lots of positivity about the camera. Kavali said, I need this beast, and now the clients who pay well as well.
If you have the clients to pay, even better.
Exactly. Kavali is also asking, how big is the screen? It just seems a little bit small. It's the same size.
Same as the C70, which I think was 3.5 inches off the top of my head.
Yep. And when are both cameras available? Is the other thing. So the C400 is quite imminent, I believe. I don't think I have
so I think we're starting to fulfil, probably even in the next few days, some of those pre-orders. I know there's been high demand, so it might go on into the next couple of months as we fulfil those. But stock should hopefully start shipping in November for the C80.
And what I would say to our customers there, if you just pick up the phone and talk to our sales team, they are constantly getting updated information from manufacturers. And so the worst person to ask is always me, because I'm on the other side of the company and don't know. The best people to ask are our fantastic account managers. So pick up the phone, send us an email, find somebody to chat to, and actually, they would be very happy to help. And give you more information. I think that's a great place to finish it. Is there anything else that you wanted to? You've got a summary screen up.
That's just for people to read through if they like. But
good one to screen grab.
Yeah, you can see there's a lot of camera crammed into this. So from the brand new 6K sensor, having that triple base ISO, same sort of form factor, but with added connectivity, even things like built-in Wi-Fi if you want to use the new multi-camera control app to control from your phone.
Interestingly, we've just had a question on that. Gwen is saying, did you cover remote control options? For example, I didn't see it listed as supported on the Canon multi-camera app page, but the C400
probably just not been updated. So yeah, I mean, I did have a thing on it there, but yeah, you can use the multi-camera control app, which works with any of the latest Rios cameras. But of course, with this one, you don't need dongles to make that work, and it's a brilliant app. If you're not aware, you can control up to 4 Cinema Rios and XF605 cameras at once. You can see their feeds, you can have like a multicam view, you can trigger record, change settings, and even use it as like a mini director's monitor if you want to pass it to your client, and the latency is minimal. It's a really nice app.
Very, very cool. Kafala's also asking, will there be RF cinema lenses coming? There are RF cinema lenses. You have your cinema primes in RF, don't you? And a few zooms? others? Do some of the? No, it's just the cinema primes.
Well, we have the RF CN7, but that's obviously a different
Yes,
Cine
that's what I'm
Servo
thinking
lens. But yeah, we do have the CNR primes. The advantage of them over the CNE primes, the EF ones, is they can pass out the metadata. So that's good for two things. It's good for virtual production, going back to that, and visual effects, because it can write it into the file. And it's also good because it can give you, like with stills lenses, it can give you real-time lens corrections. So any distortion correction, lens breathing, that sort of thing can be corrected in camera.
Fantastic. I think that is a really good place to leave it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for coming down.
Pleasure.
And thank you everyone for watching as well. There's some absolutely fantastic chat there from you guys and great questions. If I have missed any of them, I'm really sorry. There was a lot coming in there very quickly. If I've missed any, just leave them as comments underneath this video, which will be available to watch obviously after the fact on YouTube. So we will be monitoring that and answering any questions that you might have. So thank you very much for watching. And of course, if you're looking to order any of these products, just get in touch with ProAV. That's what we're here for. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.
Ready, go!
1, 2, 3, 4. If it's glass, yeah, you're gonna shatter it. Follow your battles, you got it. Talent, how to the cure. If it's trash, yeah, you're gonna take it out. Handle it rapidly, got the magic, you got it for sure. You can see what's in your jar.
Oh my god.
Mission sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
It's astonishing.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
1. Action.
Meet Swit's latest RGBW panel innovations, the Van Gogh 70 and Van Gogh 100 LED panels. The Van Gogh series uses exclusive edge-mounted RGBW SMD LEDs, which results in an extremely